Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
You're my guy. You're my guy. But you can't do that, is what my boss said to me. And you know what? For the very first time since I'd started in this particular job, can't tell you which one. Can't tell you how long ago this was. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. But for the first time since I'd started this job, I felt like I was on my own. I felt like I had no one to turn to. I felt like no one had my back, and I felt like no one was on my side. That's how I felt. Now, as it turns out, this boss who had been so supportive of me, drawing a line in the sand saying, "You're my guy, but you can't do that," he was completely right. He was completely right to say so. And I'm going to go out on a limb and guess he gave me a very easygoing, watered-down version of what people a level or two above him would have asked him to say to me. It was one of those learning experiences. I'd behaved, well, look, here's the thing. There's always difficulty where art and commerce meet. And before I was in radio, I was sort of this headstrong punk rock kid. The world had stood up and applauded when I'd said exactly what was on my mind with a microphone on a stage. Screaming and yelling was my stock in trade, and, well, business had been rather good. So I'd been patted on the back by the world for being completely forthright and telling people to their face what I think. In the entertainment world, it was applauded. Radio is a little different, I discovered that day. As I discovered that day, you can't just tell people that you're right, they're wrong, they're a moron, you're smart, they're stupid, and they should shut up and go away, and expect for there not to be some repercussions around the office. I am shocked. I'm shocked that this somewhat more evolved version of myself has a job in this day and age, bearing in mind some of the things I said and did. Was I right when I mouthed off to people? Was I right when I told people that if they wanted to get into it, we could get into it? In principle, yes. My actions were despicable and childish. And my boss let me know so in a very gentle way. "You're my guy," he said, "but you can't do these things." And the only reason I bring this up is because I remember the feeling. I remember the feeling of support being withdrawn, I suppose. That blanket sense of carte blanche I had to do what I wanted to do, that fearlessness that had propelled me to where I was in the world, no longer existed because I saw that there were some very real world repercussions for some of my actions. And that was a sobering and different kind of experience, one that I had not had up until this stage in the game. You ever had that happen to you? You ever have one of those things where you're amazed in retrospect that you didn't get fired in the workplace? I think we've all had an instance or two of those where something happens and you're like, how do I still have a job after this? But it was that feeling. It was that feeling of having the rug pulled from underneath you. It was that feeling of all of a sudden realizing that you're completely on your own. That feeling that you are almost in free fall and you're scrambling for something to hold on to, something to buoy you up, something to keep you alive for long enough to correct the situation. You ever had one of those things happen to you? Do you know that sensation? That sensation of imminent doom that hits you? I mean, look, we've all had that happen to us. We've all been chewed out at work. We've all been, told in no way, shape, or form that we're not excused from observing the norms that the rest of our coworkers have to observe. And we've all felt, oh my God, what am I going to do in these situations? And the reason I bring this up is because I was thinking to myself today, based on what Trump said in a rather surprising move, that's how Kavanaugh's got to be feeling right at this moment. Did you hear what Trump said about Kavanaugh? It's a bit of, it's having the rug pulled from underneath him, and we'll get into it next.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So have you ever had to deal with addiction? Have you ever had somebody in your family or your immediate environment or somebody that you come into contact with every single day that struggles with addiction, maybe alcoholism? You know what's really interesting? If you ever go to an Al-Anon meeting, Al-Anon, in case you did not know, is for the families of alcoholics. You'll come across a bit of a recurring theme. You ever heard of the expression dry drunk? Now, look, let's take an obvious and somewhat cliched, but cliched for a reason. Look at the situation of perhaps having an alcoholic parent. And we start to understand how dry drunks happen. One of the things that is very disturbing for the children of alcoholics or family members of alcoholics is the inconsistency of the person that is an alcoholic or is dealing with whatever addiction that they've got going on. You know, that sort of idea that children require consistency. They need to know what rules are so they know how to follow them and they know how to feel okay. Like it can take away from a child's ability to enjoy life if they don't know what the results of their actions are going to be. Does that make sense? And when you have an alcoholic, inconsistent parent, someone who can be the greatest person on the face of the planet 1 minute and then can punish you unreasonably or be angry and aggressive toward you with no real tangible justification, at least as far as a kid can show, the next moment, it really puts you off kilter. And what's kind of interesting is, the inconsistent behavior of an alcoholic, angry one moment, loving the next, no real explanation as to how or why this happens, no reasonable line that you can draw between your actions and their behavior. That can be learned. You don't necessarily have to have been an alcoholic. You don't have to be an alcoholic. You just have to be around one during some formative moments. And you can pick up that wildly inconsistent behavior. And if you go to an Al-Anon meeting and you start to hear stories being shared, oftentimes you hear people who have come to the realization that even though they've never had a sip of liquor in their entire life, even though they've never had a drink once in their entire life, they've treated people around them in a similar manner to how their alcoholic parent treated them growing up. Now, you might be an alcoholic. You might have alcoholism in your family. You might be the child of an alcoholic. And if that's the case, this is kind of well-worn territory. This is something that you might have firsthand experience of. But it's an interesting and devastatingly sad thing to have happen to you. To be a dry drunk. Because oftentimes when you realize that your behavior is mimicking that of your alcoholic parent, it's just devastating stuff. Because you could be one of those people that made the decision, I'm not going to be like my parent. I'm not going to put my children or my family or anyone through the kind of pain and suffering that my alcoholic parent put me through. I'm going to do this by abstaining from drinking, being on the straight and narrow, never touching alcohol, and thereby preventing that cycle of behavior from perpetuating itself in my family. I'm going to take a stand against these things. And then, for a lot of people, there's a horrible realization that even though they took a stand against this cycle of addiction, even though they took a stand against this type of behavior, even though they did what it made sense to do to avoid inflicting that type of pain and insecurity on the people around them, just because they were around it, just because that's how they're raised, that's how they've gone through the world relating to people, and it's devastating stuff. And you know what? It's really difficult conditioning to break. Really, really difficult conditioning to break, being a dry drunk. And man, I'm no doctor. I'm no child psychologist. I'm no psychologist. I have no medical qualifications whatsoever. And this is just me kind of spitballing. But you've seen it. I've seen it. We've all seen it. The inconsistency with which Donald Trump approaches daily life and his allegiances to people. One moment, they can be the devil incarnate. They can be an evil a-hole that hates America, that wants to see it all burn. And the next moment, he can say, they were very nice to me. We're getting along great. I've got a great relationship with him. Nice guy, really quality guy, top shelf, good stuff. And, you know, I can't help but wonder if maybe this had something to do with the fact that Donald Trump's brother, guy who I believe was 8 years older than him, a guy who he grew up around, basically, I think, drank himself to death. So he had alcoholism and addiction in his family, in very close proximity. And despite the fact that Donald Trump has never taken a sip of liquor and has encouraged his kids to abstain as well, that inherited behavior could be what's coming out and could be what Kavanaugh is living through at the moment. Did you hear what he said about him? Hang out for this. It's interesting stuff.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radio Land. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So, you know, this is why we're talking about Kavanaugh and why he must feel kind of isolated, alone, in a bit of a free fall at the moment. Only because, well, look, to the hilt, he appeared to be backed by his supporters. Chief among them, Donald Trump. Kavanaugh has been accused at this stage in the game by 4 different women. They keep mounting up. Now, there's all sorts of people that would question the credibility of the various accusations. But like I said, these things, they're starting to mount up. And, well, with this Me Too stuff, right or wrong, America has been conditioned to kind of look for a pattern. There's one accusation. Well, you know, let's see how this all plays out. There's 2 accusations. There's 3. There's 4. They're okay. Where there's that much smoke, there has to be a certain amount of fire. Perfect example. There was one accusation that lost Garrison Keillor everything. Garrison Keillor was accused by one woman of sexual impropriety, and everything he had went up in flames. And in retrospect, people look at that one and go, I don't know. That was, well, he wasn't really offered a chance to give his side of the story. Maybe we need to look at these things a little bit more carefully. Accusations absolutely 100 million% must be heard. People that have been the victims of sexual abuse or assault or misconduct must be heard, must be taken seriously, must be listened to. It's unthinkable that it's gone on this long. But also, man, Garrison Keillor lost absolutely everything. Oof. He never really had a chance to defend himself or state his case or any of the above. And he was old enough that he said he didn't want to fight it. But did the right thing really happen there? I think that was the tipping point where people started to look a little bit more closely and carefully at things. But conversely, as opposed to Garrison Keillor's case, when there are multiple accusations, when the Cosby accusations started to mount up, when there was enough smoke to assume that there was a certain amount of fire, people just sort of started presuming, I mean, come on, he's got to be guilty of something. Look. And on the flip side of it, guy like Maynard James Keenan, frontman of Tool, there was an internet rumor about him doing some stuff at a concert years ago. And, well, he shut it down completely and seemingly effortlessly. He said it was absolute garbage and it was unsubstantiated, and he didn't dignify it with any more responses, and nothing more has happened since then. Russell Simmons, guy who put Run DMC, Beastie Boys, Def Jam Records on the map. At first, he seemed to skate on it because there was one accusation, and he was like, no, sorry, but I totally know what you're talking about. This was completely consensual. Absolutely not. I would never do anything like that. And he definitely had the benefit of the doubt. But then, more and more accusers came forward with more and more detailed accusations. And, well, he's effectively been put out of business by it. Whether there's going to be criminal charges or whether there's going to be any sort of follow-up that could land him in jail, we don't know. But we know that because of the volume of accusers in his case, he's been effectively stymied. Now, with the Kavanaugh situation, when there was one accuser and obvious political gain for the Trump and Kavanaugh opposition in it, people looked at it and went, this is politics. Politicians can trot out people to say whatever they want to say in an attempt to derail the opposition. No one would be surprised if a politician on either side of the political fence fabricated a horrific story like this in order to secure their own political gain. So I think that the Kavanaugh accusation was looked at when there was just one accuser with a certain amount of skepticism by people that were pro-Kavanaugh and people that would love to see the back of Kavanaugh. Oh, and by the way, Kavanaugh, if you are an anti-Kavanaugh person, is probably what you would consider to be the lesser of a range of evils that a Supreme Court justice that was going to be in there for the rest of their natural life could present. Like Kavanaugh, if you're worried about Roe v. Wade being overturned by a Supreme Court justice, Kavanaugh is probably the least of your worries in terms of what could come out of a Republican camp in this situation. So, yeah, it's an interesting situation we find ourselves in. But I digress. The point is, When there was one accusation against Kavanaugh, a lot of people went, this obviously needs to be heard, but this really could be a political play more than anything else. And then a second accusation, and then a third, and now perhaps a fourth. And Donald Trump, who up until today had been like, this is ridiculous. This guy is a toppy-notchy sort of individual. This is a guy who I'm backing to the hilt. This is all garbage. This is all fabricated. This is all complete hogwash. It's not going to slow us down. He's going to be our guy. The end. Well, today Donald Trump's tune started to change a scotch. Today, the message that he sent with regard to Kavanaugh was more than a little mixed. He said he could be convinced. Yeah. He gave that big press conference today. And when he did, he said he'd be watching that Senate hearing on Thursday with an open mind. He said that evil people are behind many public charges of sexual misconduct, but he'd be watching this with an open mind. Kavanaugh, not long before that, said, I know he's going to stand by me. He called me this afternoon and said he's standing by me. So Kavanaugh must have breathed a momentary sigh of relief when, Donald Trump called me. He said he's going to stand by me. The end. But then, like just a few hours later, Donald Trump, I guess, gave himself, what would you call it? Donald Trump gave himself an exit strategy. Donald Trump gave himself a life vest, a parachute in the Kavanaugh situation. Now, the bottom line is, this stuff that allegedly happened 35 years ago. And there's probably not going to be that much real, irrefutable evidence. Producing physical evidence at this stage in the game, that seems awfully unlikely. So the hearing is most likely going to be a continuation of what we've seen in the press. We're never really likely to get a real answer as to what happened the night these accusations talk about. It will continue to be a bunch of he said, she said. But if there's enough she said in this situation, Kavanaugh could go down in flames. It's been a short space of time. There's been 3 named Kavanaugh accusers. There's a 4th one waiting in the wings. Who knows how many are geared up and ready to go. So seeing this happen, Donald Trump, not long after saying to Kavanaugh, I'm going to stand by you, call you, tell you stand by me. Hey, this is the president. I'm Donald Trump, and you're my guy. Well, that rug was pulled out from underneath him. Donald Trump gave himself the escape. Donald Trump gave himself the exit strategy, the parachute, the life vest, whatever you want to call it. During that press conference, after the UN brouhaha, instead of saying, nope, absolutely not, he's my guy, that's my boy Blue, instead of that, he said they're going to have a big shot at speaking and making their case of the female accusers. They're going to have a big shot in speaking and making their case. He said he could be persuaded also. Hours after calling Kavanaugh and saying, you're my boy, Blue, he had a completely different story to tell the press. And if I'm Kavanaugh right now, I'm starting to feel like I'm in free fall. So we will be seeing an embattled man when he testifies tomorrow. Donald Trump said, quote, "I could be convinced of anything." And you know what? By the way, this is the right thing to say. Not just because you want an escape, not just because you're looking for an exit strategy, not just because you're looking to keep your hands cleaner than they would be if you backed a guy to the hilt who public opinion decided was someone guilty of serial sexual assault. It's the right thing to do because you don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And hopefully, this winds up being fair for all concerned, Kavanaugh included. I hope it winds up being fair for Kavanaugh. Because this is Me Too. On an incredibly visible global stage. And anybody who treats this with less than the proper amount of respect and dignity is really damaging the idea of Me Too and damaging the ability that people have to come forward and be heard in these situations. You can't make it a circus. You can't make it, oh, he's definitely guilty, or she's definitely lying. Doesn't matter how you feel about this situation. For the sake of equality, for the sake of the progress that's been made over the last year with regard to people that have been victims of sexual assault being able to come forward and talk about these things, it has to be listened to in a fair and equitable way by everyone. You might despise the idea of what Kavanaugh brings to the Supreme Court. You might be all for it. But for the sake of freaking humanity, you have to approach it with an open mind and you have to be fair. But like I said, Kavanaugh has to feel as though the rug's been pulled out from underneath him because Trump went, "You're my guy. You're my guy. You're my boy blue." And now he's saying, "I could be convinced of anything," which, like I said, is the right way to look at it. So, a moment of, crap, not only for Kavanaugh, not only for Kavanaugh's team, but for, well, Republicans who see Kavanaugh as their opportunity to get a Supreme Court justice confirmed ahead of the midterm elections. Kavanaugh apparently was watching as Trump started talking about the possibility of choosing a replacement. And that, just hours after Trump said, "I totally got your back." Ooh. To talk about his potential replacement, that's gotta suck.
Now, more AD on the radio.
So, again, it sort of, to me, mimics the behavior of an alcoholic, that inconsistent behavior of an alcoholic. Maybe you've had the great misfortune of dealing with it, but look, there's a reason why it's traumatizing for the children of alcoholics to grow up the children of alcoholics. Rules, reasonable expectations that need to be met are so important for kids because kids have to know what's around the corner. Kids have to know that their behavior will get a response. If they behave well, everything's going to be cool. And they'll be able to sit back and enjoy life. If they behave badly, well, they can expect to be punished. As much as punishing kids for doing wrong seems a tough road to hoe sometimes for some parents. Apparently, according to child development types, it's important that you do and you do so consistently because kids need to know what to expect. The child of an alcoholic who can be a freaking delight one moment and a person who can punish you for absolutely nothing or treat you harshly or snap at you or be aggressive toward you without any justification, that's difficult stuff. That's difficult stuff to go through. And dealing with Donald Trump, despite the fact that he's never had a sip of liquor in his life, is in many ways, I think, for the people around him, like dealing with an alcoholic in that you are constantly insecure. He is an inconsistent individual. If you know that you can count on one thing, it's that you can't count on him. He's trying to nail down what Donald Trump really thinks of someone or a situation. And I think this is part of the reason why the whole world right now is living in a state of suspended terror is because trying to get a beat on what Donald Trump really thinks is like trying to wrap your arms around Jell-O. It's not possible. Look, this is a guy who has said, hey, who said on Twitter, hey, my Fire and Fury button works way better than Kim Jong's. Little Rocket Man better watch his ass because I could nuke him at any second. Cut to, we're making great progress. We're becoming great friends. We're on our way to world peace. Well, which is it? It's scary. The inconsistency, the extremes of the situation are scary. And it's a lot like growing up with an alcoholic parent. And it's a lot like what the entire world is feeling like right now. In a state of somewhat suspended terror, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing when the bombs are going to fall, not knowing when the other shoe's going to drop, not knowing what today is going to hold for you when you wake up in the morning, because the most powerful office in the world is held by someone who is wildly inconsistent. Now, is this strategic on his part? Is this purposeful on his part? Was this environmental? Did he become a dry drunk because he lived with a brother who died of alcoholism and it's a learned behavior for him? We don't know, but we know the end result. It's somewhat terrifying to be caught in his wake. And that's exactly what's going on with Kavanaugh at the moment. And it was interesting. Another thing that Donald Trump managed to do, as he does with, well, more or less every situation he encounters, was to pretty fairly well make it all about himself. He told reporters that he'd been wrongly accused by women who got paid a lot of money to make up stories about him. And here's the thing. A lot of people tell you he wasn't really hooking Kavanaugh up in that situation. On the one hand, he might have been saying, rich and powerful men are open to this sort of thing and need to be protected. I know because I've been through it. But a lot of people would say he didn't do Kavanaugh any favors with that particular comparison. Just because, well, when Donald Trump dismisses allegations against himself, it's not necessarily coming from what people consider to be a credible source. So equating himself with Kavanaugh doesn't really work. Ask Billy Bush. Sorry, name was stuck on the tip of my tongue for a second. Ask Billy Bush. Billy Bush was caught in Donald Trump's wake. Donald Trump said, when you're famous, you can grab women by the unmentionables. Billy Bush was caught on tape going, oh, Donald, you're a bit of a card. And what happens? Billy Bush can't get a job. He's out on his ear. He's beyond fired. He is persona non grata in the world of broadcast television. And all he did was go, okay. Well, and by the way, I'm not forgiving that or excusing that. But if you look at the situation, Billy Bush was around Donald Trump when he said despicable and horrible things with regard to women and his right to do what he wanted to do to them because of his fame. Locker room talk or not, you can't get around the fact that Billy Bush is, like I said, dead in the water, can't get hired. He was caught up in Donald Trump's wake. Meanwhile, Donald Trump ascends to the highest office in the land. He becomes the most powerful person on the face of the planet. And Billy Bush can't get a gig. So, let's be real here. Donald Trump going, I know what it's like. I've been unfairly accused of stuff like that. And what Kavanaugh is going through, that's no fun. I've been told by numerous people that I sexually assaulted him, and clearly I did not. Kavanaugh, he deserves the same benefit of the doubt. It doesn't work that way. I don't know what it is about Donald Trump, but he is uniquely capable of getting out of things that people are sure would be career ending unscathed. He'll slither through no matter what the accusation or allegation is, or at least he's proven time and time again that he can. But Kavanaugh's not him. There's only one Trump. There's only one man agile enough to dodge all this stuff. So, yeah, Donald Trump wasn't doing Kavanaugh any favors when he was like, him and me have a lot in common. Oops.
Leave the stimulation to the professionals.
Everyone is so smart.
KBRC, more stimulating talk radio.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is. The dumbing up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
Do you eat fish? I try and eat fish as often as possible. Here's the thing. I don't like to cook it myself. Why? Because it makes the house smell like fish, which is a bit of a contradiction, bit of a double standard on my part. But, you know what? Here's the thing. We like fish that doesn't taste like fish. My favorite thing about salmon, it doesn't really taste like fish. I eat as much of that as possible. An irony that was pointed out by the legendary Jim Gaffigan.
I wish I liked fish. I wish I was the person in the restaurant so like, I don't get to go out to dinner that often, but instead of getting a delicious steak, I'll get the fish because I like disgusting food. Because fish is disgusting. How bored are you with eating if you're ordering the fish? Just bring me something gross. I like to waste money. Who's the first person to walk into a harbor and go, hey, whatever reeks in here, let's eat that? Fish don't even like fish. That's why they're always frowning. They're like, what's that smell? Oh, it's me. I'm a fish. What's the best compliment you can give fish? Is to say that it's not fishy. Isn't fish supposed to be fishy? Get the hamburger. It's not burgery. Fishy is an indication something's wrong. Something fishy going on here? No, everything's burgery.
Yeah, you know who's eating great still, despite his current situation? That would be Bill Cosby. Yeah, did you hear about this? Did you see that incredible meal that he got? He got veal, sort of a mixed tomato salad and vegetables whilst in prison. Yeah. So it's a little odd. Well, one can only hazard a guess that moving forward, his selection of food won't be quite as delectable. I'll leave any highly obvious salad-tossing jokes to you, but you know who has the worst job on the planet at the moment? That would be Cosby's publicist, who, by the way, did you hear this? Genuinely still seems to believe.
Mr. Cosby's doing great, and Mr. Cosby knows that God is watching over him. He knows that these are lies. They persecuted Jesus, and look what happened. Not saying Mr. Cosby is Jesus, but we know what this country has done to black men for centuries. So Mr. Cosby's doing fine. He's holding up well. And everybody who wants to say anything negative, you're a joke as well. Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew Wyatt. Tough gig. Bill Cosby's publicist. Went on the record saying that Cosby was treated as badly as the Romans treated Jesus. Okay. All right. Cosby's going to jail. You've seen the pictures, right? 3 to 10 years, which is, it's a really, really broad range of time. I don't know entirely what that means. 3 to 10 years. At his age, it could be kind of a pointless excursion. I mean, how many years does a guy like Cosby have left? But yeah. In case you somehow managed to miss it, Bill Cosby was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison for drugging and sexually assaulting Andrea Constant in 2004. He was also hit with a $25,000 fine, and he was declared to be a sexually violent predator. Prosecutors were asking for 5 to 10, while his lawyers were pushing for house arrest. The sentence was reduced from a maximum of 30 years after some of the charges were combined. Now, in case you're wondering if Bill Cosby is going to be able to run out the clock, he is 81 years old and not in the greatest of health. Before he was led away in handcuffs, the judge told him, quote, "It is time for justice. Mr. Cosby, this is all circled back to you. The time has come." Janice Dickinson, former supermodel Janice Dickinson, who was in the courtroom as one of Cosby's accusers, told him, quote, "Here's the last laugh, pal." But you know what's weird? You know what's really kind of odd and unusual and wildly uncomfortable for anybody that saw it? Bill Cosby actually did laugh while talking with his lawyers after the verdict came down. But his spokesman said that Cosby had been subjected to, quote, "the most racist and sexist trial in the history of the United States." Interestingly enough, he also linked Cosby's fate to the controversy that we've been talking about for the last couple of days. The one that's playing out right now on a world stage, that would be Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh's situation. And this is what he had to say about it. He said that both Kavanaugh and Cosby are victims of a sex war that's going on right now. I don't know. It's like we were talking about with Donald Trump. If Donald Trump's trying to paint Kavanaugh in a sympathetic light, comparing himself to Kavanaugh, saying, look at me, I've been accused by hundreds of women of sexual assault. I know what it's like. You're not really doing Kavanaugh any favors to be to compare him to Cosby. You know, Kavanaugh's a lot like the guy who could be the biggest serial rapist in American history. Weirdly enough, though, Cosby did get some good-ish news. Cosby found out that they're not removing his star from the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The Hollywood Chamber of Commerce said, quote, "Once installed, the star has become part of the historic fabric of the Walk of Fame, a designated historic cultural landmark, and are intended to be permanent." Insert your own highly obvious Walk of Shame joke wherever you see fit. Really? They're going to hold on to that? That meaningless and arbitrary thing? It's now of such historical significance that you want to have a serial rapist represented on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in perpetuity? They did say, quote, "It's regrettable when the personal lives of the inductees do not measure up to the public standards and expectations." Oh, you think? So odd. Oh, this is interesting. TMZ said Cosby's first meal, besides the veal that he got veal, a tomato salad, some mixed veggies. Also, he's going to be getting vanilla pudding. Hey, if he's getting veal, one would hazard a guess that they're springing for the good stuff. They're paying for the Jell-O pudding. In case you haven't been keeping count, because it could be easy to lose count in this situation. There's a list now of 6 Cosby accusers. Anyways, here's Kimmel talking about Cosby's first meal in jail.
Bill Cosby was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in a Pennsylvania state prison. And this is interesting. TMZ did a bit of research, and they found out his first meal in jail will include pudding.
Anyways, I found it. Here's Andrew Wyatt, Bill Cosby's publicist. Well, what a gig that is. Although, like I said, he does seem to truly believe in the incredible, undeniable integrity of his client. Here's Andrew Wyatt saying that the trial was one of the most racist and sexist trials in the history of trials.
I believe and think it is important to point out that this has been the most racist and sexist trial in the history of the United States. Dr. Cosby has been one of the greatest civil rights leaders in the United States for over the last 50 years. He has also been one of the greatest educators of men and boys over the last 50 years. This was not pointed out to the jury or allowed in court because the racist and sexist mass media was attacking and denouncing Dr. Cosby whenever his lawyers even hinted there was racist and sexism present. All 3 of the psychologists who testified against Dr. Cosby were white women who make money off of accusing black men of being sexual predators. What is going on in Washington today with Judge Kavanaugh is part of that sex war that Judge O'Neill, along with his wife, are a part of.
Yeah, it is quite the conspiracy theory. All right, then. More on the Bill Cosby situation as it unfolds. Let's you and I take a look at the news. Let's finish out the day by getting into my witness news. Oh, well, there's this. Bill Cosby spokesman, that guy we just listened to, likened Cosby to Jesus. Yeah. Remind me again, my recollection of Sunday school is a little challenged at this stage again. Remind me again about the Bible passage where Jesus is a remorseless rapist? No? Oh, okay. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. We're not just talking about Cosby in this situation. Ace Frehley of Kiss? You want him to be the best man at your wedding? This is entirely doable. Yeah. Ace Frehley of Kiss will be the best man at your wedding for $6,000. I wonder how they arrived at that amount of money. Not $5,000, not $10,000, $6,000. And I'd hazard a guess that if Ace Frehley from Kiss is willing to be the best man at your wedding for $6,000, probably for another $13.50 an hour, he'd be more than willing to sweep up the confetti. At this stage in the game, we do know that he is not proud. Cher, ooh, oh gosh, this is fighting talk. Cher told Ellen that she despises Madonna. Yeah, Cher went on the record saying that she despises Madonna. Almost, but not quite as much as she despises aging naturally. Wow. That's, that could be a physical throwdown. That could be a cat fight that, strangely, no one wanted to see. Who do you have in that one? A fight between Cher and Madonna. Madonna seems scrappy. She always talks about how she grew up on the mean streets of Detroit, but isn't Cher like 7 feet tall? She'd have the reach. Sharon Osbourne has gone on the record saying that she only wants to have sex with Ozzy Osbourne on special occasions. Right, yeah. Like that odd and special occasion when he's actually coherent. Did you hear her talking about it?
You and Ozzy still have sex?
This is a bone of contention in our house.
Really?
Oh, because he's got a problem. He just is like a rabbit, and I am like, you know, birthdays, Christmas at this point in my life, special occasions. It's Thanksgiving. Why not? But I mean,
Your anniversary.
You've got it, right? But I mean, special occasions.
Well, you've been married how long, though?
We're in our 37th year.
Oh, so that's right.
Remember, years ago, Sharon, we brought up the topic, and you said, I'd rather have the flu.
Oh, no wonder he fiddles other people. He doesn't. He's a good boy.
You know, just the fact that she's willing to ever look at Ozzy Osbourne, and I preface this by saying I love Ozzy. Love Ozzy. I think he's just a freaking fantastic human being. as well as one of the most important artists of our time. But just the fact that she's willing to look at Ozzy Osbourne, let alone let him do that, bearing in mind that in an alcoholic rage he once tried to kill her, that shows the patience, tolerance, and forgiveness of a saint. So, Ozzy, I highly recommend you take it when you can get it and shut the hell up. That's it for me. Thank you so much for hanging. Thank you for being a part of my radio family. As always, this time you and I spend together, best part of my day, every single day. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it all over again. Later.